Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Rosalin Acosta, Secretary of Labor and Workforce Development, and welcome to this wonderful panel that we have here today. You know, if this was Hamilton, you'd all be sitting all the way in the front. But it's not Hamilton. It's better than Hamilton. So you're a little scattered, so I'll make sure that we try to keep as much eye contact with all of you as possible. So today I'm joined by a star-studded panel that is going to razzle-dazzle you with their knowledge on this very, very important topic. And I'm very honored to be here with you today because this intersectionality that we all talk about of education and workforce is so important. And our friends here at the panel really deal with students that are not necessarily traditional learners. They have different needs, they have different challenges. They have barriers that traditional students may not have. Their schedules are not necessarily fixed. And these are some of the things that we have to deal with and really make sure that we're addressing so students get the most out of their learning. I mean, I think to me a lot of this really is about equity and about leveling the playing field and making sure that all students, regardless of what barriers they're facing, have an opportunity to have a quality education so that they can, at the end, have those middle wage and high wage jobs that so many others enjoy. So our panel today is going to chat about several different things, and I just want to introduce them quickly. You all have their bios in your program, so I'm not going to read to you. But Pam Eddinger, she's the president of Bunker Hill Community College, an incredible partner for all of us in the workforce. We have Greg Fowler from Southern New Hampshire University that will chat with you about what SNHU is doing. And then Garrett Smith, Deputy Chancellor for UMass Boston. So I'm going to start off with about 2 or 3 questions. And then we're going to open it up to you to ask questions at about 11 o'clock. So we'll have about 15 minutes for our Q&A. So save your burning questions, and we'll try to get to everyone by the end of this. So the first question I have for all of you is coming from the lens of these non-traditional learners. So how are you designing your program offerings to ensure that students with these backgrounds have the best shot possible to match their educational aspirations to a good-paying job in our economy? So Pam, why don't we start with you?
Start with a big one with Pam. It's a 5-minute answer.
That's right. Go for it. Go for it. Go big or go home.
So one of the key linkages in my mind between a higher education institution, particularly institutions like Bunker Hill that serves first-generation students, at least 50 to 60% first-generation students, and they work. Most of them are part-time, so I only have like 30% full-time students on my campus, is how do you configure a schedule that will hit all of the skills training they need, all of the supplemental classes they need, and meet all the basic needs that they have in terms of food, housing, all of those different pieces. And when they emerge, have a set of skills that are based in the field, that would work for employers, and do all of this within the context of their lives. Higher education is not at the center of my students' lives, right? So two-thirds are parents, about a third are single moms. They all work full-time. So they don't have the tradition, let's go to school Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, from 9 in the morning to 5 in the afternoon. That's when they work. So the kind of innovations that I see across the field is, of course, online education, which Dr. Fowler is one of the experts on. But at the community college end, it's also bridging that digital gap in order for them to do that online work. So I'm hoping really a lot of the innovation in the field, understand that you're not innovating for that 17-and-a-half-year-old. You're innovating for that single mom of 2, working 35 hours a week at the 2 lowest quintile of income. So if you can give her, in your innovation, the work experience in the field, the internship opportunities, and a feeling that they're attached to this portion of their lives, we will have succeeded.
I want to pick up on what Pam just said, because I think one of the things we talk a lot about at SNHU is we will never be, for the non-traditional learner, better than their third top priority after family and generally their current job. And as a result, we've also got to think a lot about what does that mean when it comes to the experiences we put in front of them and the lives that they're trying to integrate those experiences into. So when we think about the SNHU's University College campus, one of the things you see there is we're trying to perfect the coming of age experience. And as Paul LeBlanc likes to say a lot, this non-traditional population has had as much coming of age experience as they want. They aren't here to try to figure out, a new start to a new phase in from moving from teenage years to adult years. They're there because they're trying to accomplish some particular goal. So how do we create the experiences that do that? We spend, therefore, a lot of time trying to think about and partner with a lot of the workforce organizations and corporations who are trying to find the right matches for their populations as well. So whenever we begin to build a program, we start by bringing in the academicians, but we pair them with the partners in the field who are practitioners. So, and it's often interesting to see the dynamic change once you get someone in the field who says, that's not at all what we do when it comes to outcomes or competency. So building that from the very beginning and saying, here are the outcomes and competencies that these students need to know, learn, know, do, be as they move forward is very critical. If we do those things right, then we're able to explain to them, here's the benefit of the education you're getting. Here are the things you should be able to do as you move forward throughout it. So these are sort of the things we're trying to make sure we take into consideration as we move forward when it comes to workforce partnerships. One of the things when it comes to equity, Rosalin mentioned, is that it's very important for us when we're thinking about technology, and of course we're here at Learn Launch where there's a lot of technology going on, to make sure that we don't build experiences that ultimately price out the people who need us the most. So if we're talking about technology and other pieces, we want to integrate those types of things, but we also want to do so in a way that does make it more equitable for people and not less so. And with that, I'll stop for now.
No, thank you. And so Garrett, at UMass Boston, very similar population, actually, from these two. So, so chat about a little bit what's going on at UMass Boston.
Yeah, so the students are the same. We have 17,000 students, about 50% Pell eligible, 60% first generation. Everyone's working. Everyone is trying to fit school into their life. So same population. Our history is that we're a liberal arts institution. And so we deeply believe in teaching Shakespeare and giving the full array of disciplinary exposure, teaching our students to be learners. And so I think we still believe that, and we're totally committed to that. And we know we need to do more to help our students build connections to employers in Boston, the state. And we haven't done that well enough, I think, in the past. And so we're trying to get better at that while remaining true to our core, teaching the Shakespeare. So we're doing things like we've been, and I think Greg and Southern New Hampshire have really been leaders in this, and we're learning a lot from just seeing what they've done, but we're inviting employers to campus. So we have this industry cluster program where we're picking different industries and just inviting CEOs and HR executives to campus, and they say, oh, I've never been to campus before. Oh, I've never interacted with any of your students. I've never hired any of your students. And just by inviting them, we've started this conversation that both influences our faculty around curriculum to help them connect to the practitioners, and it tees up opportunities for our students. And so we had the first cluster we held was in finance, and we had 25 finance executives sitting around the table. I don't know if any of them had really been on our campus before. And within 2 weeks, our chancellor talks about how BlackRock said, well, can you by Friday get us a bunch of applications? Your students are incredibly diverse. We'd love to have a better collaboration with your campus. Can you get us resumes by Friday? And by 2 weeks later, 2 students from UMass Boston had offers to work at BlackRock.
That's great.
And no one from UMass Boston had ever gone to work at BlackRock. I'm sure someone had, but no one had really gone there before. They had never been to our campus. And so we've been rolling out this series of industry clusters to try and build that kind of connectivity. I can talk about more things, but that's one that we are really proud of.
No, that's great. And in this economy, we can't afford anyone to sit on the sidelines. I'm the daughter of 2 academics, and they were great in academics, but I never heard them talk about why they were teaching what they were teaching and how that was going to apply to the employer world. And we see that more and more with all of the schools, not even in the higher ed, but also in K through 12, in the middle schools and high schools, how that need to connect to employers, and it goes both ways. Not only does the teacher or professor need to connect to the outside, but the employer needs to connect also to the institutions, so that we can continue with this incredible economy that we have that's moving so quickly. And every industry right now is worried about automation, right? Every industry is either benefiting from it or figuring out how to retool to deal with the rapidly moving economy and the rapidly moving technology that we've got. So universities, higher ed, has to do the same exact thing. So perhaps you can start talking to us a little bit about how you're using data to meet your students' needs in ways that maybe were not possible in recent years, and how you're applying technology to get your students to have to get into the workforce maybe a little bit quicker.
Let me start. I mean, so when I think about student success, there are two things that we need to do and get better at, and I think we've been getting better at over the years. The first is just get students through to graduation, and then the second is to get them a job. And sometimes not in that order. They can happen in different orders. I think we've used technology more on the first part, so more to get students through. And we have all kinds of initiatives, especially as we cut staff on campus, to try to leverage technology to more proactively reach out to students using predictive analytics or a CRM system. We're about to put in place a chatbot so that we can actually meet students on their phones at night to answer their questions in a way that we just can't currently, because we have staff on campus during the day. And so we have all kinds of different technology initiatives happening on the traditional student success side to get students to graduation. I think we have more to learn and more to do in terms of using technology to get them jobs. And I feel like I get a vendor call once a week or almost more often telling me how they can use LinkedIn to show me what my they're telling me more about our graduates than I know, just on a single vendor call, because of the way they're able to comb LinkedIn or other sources on the internet.
I'm going to sort of, on the other end of that conversation, I want to sort of focus outwards on what are we doing in the Commonwealth in terms of labor market research and labor market information in the kind of regional planning and really the WIOA planning that Secretary Acosta is doing, within her secretariat, and how those things inform how we shape programs and where we develop new programs. So between it's a 4-year plan or a 5-year plan?
It's
for WIOA.
It's just continuous. Oh, for WIOA, yes.
Yeah. So there are multiple pieces of planning going on. There's regional planning. There's WIOA planning for Perkins dollars. But what I'm finding in the field is that all of that information is converging because we're pulling on similar data sources. We know in the greater Boston area that the healthcare industry, the professional and IT industry, and the creative economy, including gaming, are the top 3 industry that's going to drive us. That's really important in what I tell my students for that first career or for that first job. So now I know that in some of the subcommittees that we work in, we're actually drilling down into what kind of certifications do we need and what is stackable. So the students are not only getting certifications in the field to do all the things that they need to do in the content area, but they're building up credentialing so that that BA on the next level, that master's degree at the next level, and that PhD in the next level are not out of reach. When you talk about equity, I think that's really important in that we're not attenuating potentials, right, at the certificate level or at the associate degree level, because someone doing a certificate today may very well be that PhD student 5 years from now. So I think that equity of leveling opportunities for everyone, including being able to do liberal arts and understanding Shakespeare, so that when you're at that corporate environment, you can have conversations that are opening. You can get creativity and innovation and frame it in ways that is good for our students' lives. And with 65,000 jobs in the offing, that has not enough people to fill it, and about 3/4 of those jobs are middle skills, new collar jobs. So are paying attention to the data that's coming out of these industries and us crafting the stackable credentials on the college end. That's really where the research for data and our implementation and actionable data sources becomes important. So we've revamped it. We revamped our IT area. We closed down 4 options, and we've reopened 6. And we need to do this on a continuing basis.
Yeah, I think that for us, I'll start with the data conversation, which is being able to reach students where they are and realizing that all students aren't the same, instead of coming to them with a single canned experience. Being able to use the data to say, where are these individual students struggling and how can we impact them, is one of the things that we've spent a lot of time trying to make sure we understand. So whether it is 70% of the students who are engaged in this behavior or 20% of the students who are engaged in this assessment are or are not doing well, is one of the things that we've tried to build our experiences around, because that allows us to really take into consideration for these non-traditional learners that even with non-traditional, that's not a category by itself. There are people who have, for various reasons, different needs and different struggles that they have. One of the groups we spend a lot of time with, I see a number of our team in here from our online accessibility center, is how do you help students who have accessibility issues to get jobs that they're going to need moving forward, whether it is, we were very excited to see the person who graduated last summer in our IT program was blind, who had the highest GPA in the program. How do you create those types of experiences so that students can be successful in them? These are the types of things that aren't necessarily the sort of run-of-the-mill experiences that students are going to have. When it comes to, Garrett was mentioning the general education, and of course we're thinking all about the idea of automation, but the enduring skills, the thing we continue to hear, the pieces that Joseph Aoun would talk about as these sort of humanics, these ideas that regardless of what happens with certain things, there will always be the need for the things that make us human, the critical thinking skills, the ability to empathize, the ability to engage in ways. So we're trying to make sure that we're thinking about those skills not in simply a buffet style of take 2 of this and 2 of that and 2 of this, but to really think about what do these skills need to be? How do those skills need to change given the changing workplace? So now we're dealing much more with technology literacy than we might have been doing a couple of years ago. In a world where it's very hard to discern what information is real and what's not, and whether someone actually said something, because you can actually imprint a face and a voice onto things. Understanding the ability to decipher information is absolutely critical. So how do we rethink these skills and tie them back to what's going on in the workplace is going to be a critical piece of this as well. Our work with LR&G and some of the others is very much tied to also making sure that the skills that people are acquiring in the workforce are able to also translate back into academic credit. So how do I make that tie between the two so that people who are working for Apple or others are able to say, we see those experiences, we can actually link those back to credit here in the classroom, and therefore help you to move along faster as a result of those types of experiences. Because a lot of the learning, in fact, most of us would admit that the vast majority of the things we're going to learn in our lives happen outside of the classroom. And in fact, what we're really trying to do in the classroom is prepare them to be lifelong learners in that way. And I know people use that phrase and it's almost overused at this point, but if we do the training right, then we've actually equipped them to last in the workforce as they're moving forward.
I know, well said. And there's that balance, right? That balance of getting quickly to a credential, and that balance of, yep, there are those skills, and there are those, you know, some people call them soft skills, essential skills, whatever you want to call them, but that maybe a traditional liberal arts education might give you, that we always have to keep in mind as we're really rushing to fill jobs. I mean, because there are so many, and they're actually Commonwealth-wide, there are 200,000 open jobs right now, and we've got about 110,000 people looking for work. So, you know, there are a lot of folks that have stopped looking for work because they've gotten discouraged and they're not being counted, or they're underemployed. They're doing something that's not really up to their capacity and could be doing a lot more, earning a lot more money, and we need to bring those adults also into the conversation and make sure that we're training them to get better jobs. So there are a lot of barriers, and you spoke about some of the barriers that some of your students face, and obviously completion rates is something that we're always really working hard on, making sure that if a student starts, they complete, especially since they're already incurring debt, right? That they get to the goal line. And I don't know if you can do this, but what would you say would be you know, the single largest barrier that you're facing to get your students to complete their education? I think it's going to be hard to do a single, but if you can.
I don't know if it's hard.
Okay.
It's hard to solve. It's
Yes,
not necessarily
yes.
hard.
It's not hard to define,
Right.
yeah.
And I'm going to tell you a story. So only 25% of my students are full-time, taking 5 classes a semester in a normal way. And when folks worry about community college completion, I always say to them, you need to learn basic math, right? You need 60 credits to get an associate degree. That's 30 per year. That's 15 credits per semester. 5 classes, those of you who come through the college system. If you're working 40 hours a week, how is it at all possible that you should be able to complete on time? So when the federal government measures us, they are measuring, their metrics is framed on a 4-year, 17-and-a-half-year-old student. Financial aid policy follows that. So we have really structural policy issues that is not allowing us as a higher ed community to really define what is it that can get our students there quicker. It's a matter of having enough time, and most of the time it's having enough money, right? To be able to take 5 classes, food, housing, transportation, childcare. Without those, you can't survive. So it's a matter, I think, of economics. And here's a proof point. So I told my research folks to take a group of students who've dropped out, right? So these are my biggest issue. And I said, do an analysis. How are they doing academically? And how are they sort of accumulating credits, which is a metrics for successful academic performance? Half of those folks have a GPA of 2.58 and above. So we're not talking about people dropping out because they can't do the work. And the other half, or the other 3/4, has 30 credits or more. So what's making our students drop out and lowering those rates is that emergency room trip they have to take with their child that costs them $500, right? There's no carburetors anymore, I can't say that. or whatever it is, emergencies, that takes them off track, and because of that $500, they can't come back. So I don't have a solution other than to keep finding more money.
Right.
But it is an issue of time.
Yeah, and that life happens. I mean, it really is.
Happens.
It's the category when we do exit surveys of students, and it's sort of a broad category of life really does get in the way. We have a lot of students in our online program when we interview them as they're coming in the door who have been to 3, 4, 5, sometimes 6 schools. And still have no degree. And when you talk to them about this isn't that they can't get the work generally. It's not about the content's too hard for me. It really is about how do I navigate this space of all the things that I have to get through on a regular basis, or some of the other things that we have never traditionally thought about. It's only been really in the last 5 years that I've really heard an emphasis on things like hunger, mental health. These types of things have an impact on how students are being able to be successful, and how does a college solve for those types of things is a major challenge that I don't think any college has really come up with the magic formula for. But these are the big things that tend to keep them from being successful as they move forward. One of the reasons we spend a lot of time with support is, in a lot of cases, peers have as much power as administrators do to help them. So how do we partner you more with people who you may feel more comfortable talking with? So trying to make sure we do that is going to be critical as well.
I think I would just agree and amplify most of what you said. I mean, the typical things that jump to mind when we ask that question on our campus are life, money, sometimes it's preparation and grades. But all those things are solvable. We have money is a little harder, and if there, anyone from Beacon Hill in the room, money, can help. But we have the ability to solve most of those challenges, whether it's hunger or the things that happen in life, or figuring out at least small dollars on the money. We're just not always successful in doing it. And the students aren't necessarily successful in navigating our campus to figure out how to get that help.
Actually,
so I think meeting students where they are, what Greg was saying earlier, is so critical, and we need to get better at meeting them where they are, identifying where they are, so we can give them the resources that we already have. So then, to me, my frame is, so then it's our problem. It's not, life isn't the problem, money isn't the problem. It's how do we meet them where they are.
Right. Because one piece that you almost never hear in these discussions is all about economics. And I can tell you a good portion of the solution for us is cultural belonging. Right? We're a quarter Black and African American, a quarter Latinx, a quarter white, 15% Asian Pacific Islanders, and 10% a mix. Imagine first-generation students in those environments coming into a higher education framework. They are immigrants in their own educational system. So unless we make it a point to connect culturally to create those kinds of belonging, and not just, once in a while you have a Hispanic Heritage Month or Black History Month, but to really inculcate those values inside your curriculum and inside, so that we don't just read Shakespeare, but we also read Quixote, right? So those differences will firm that attachment, and that doesn't cost anything.
Right.
And it's almost never mentioned.
And that's at the center of the framework that I think we have to move towards, which is it's actually not simply trying to put an experience in front of the students. It's really trying to put the learner at the center of the experience. And being able to understand what that means and the framework that requires of us, and not putting the burden simply of, we have created the mountain, Moses come to it. But trying to say, what are the things that matter? Belonging is a critical part of that as you move forward. And that requires you to be able to get outside of the box of the pedagogy that you've already created and say, what is it that we can actually do? How do we take up on some of the responsibility of solving these problems as we move forward?
That's well said, and obviously educational attainment is directly tied to income. And as I don't know if anyone in the room has read the McKinsey report on the future of work, and talks really about how many jobs are going to be evolving to extinction over the next 10 years. And if you look at some of those jobs, they're mostly low-income wage jobs. And if you look at the demographics of who's in those jobs, it's mostly people of color. So we have a real issue there, and that we all have to work on, whether it's through our education systems, whether it's through the workforce system. But it's a challenge that we're facing now. Really, if you think about 10 years, 2030 is now 10 years less and counting, right? And so the retraining and the reskilling of those workers is going to be really important over the next few years. So we have time for some questions. And first of all, I want to thank our wonderful panelists for coming here today and sharing your wisdom with us. So can I have a round of applause, please, for our panelists? All right, so why don't we, I think there are mics in the room, so why don't we open up, there's a question up here. First one, Michael?
Yes.
Well, is a mic coming? Let's just wait 1 second. Thank you.
Thank you. So first of all, thank you all. It's a wonderful panel, really interesting. You've talked a lot about various aspects of the future of work, and I'm wondering if you could talk just a little bit about the implications for the future of work for academics. Because a lot of the things that you've been talking about are completely foreign to their training, and completely, if couched in the wrong way, will feel antithetical to what they've been trained that they need to defend. If you're a literature scholar, whether it's of Shakespeare or in Ngugi, to be told, well, you have to prepare students to go to work in an accounting firm, they're going to say, right. Not my job. As opposed to, well, now we need to mine Shakespeare or Ngugi for purposes that are relevant to these students. So how do you each go about in your institutions getting past that sort of immune system reaction and helping the faculty, supporting the faculty in their future work?
Great question.
I have an example for you. So a couple of years ago, about 3 years ago, we created a Center for Equity and Cultural Wealth, precisely because we've noticed this dissonance, right, between the academy, the traditional academy, four-year academy, really, and the way that we were all trained as faculty and administrators coming out of that very, very standard system. And that we believe in the idea of co-learning. If you tell me that somebody who was trained 40 years ago in a state, teachers college, would have the skills and understanding today without the professional development in between, I would tell you, you've got somebody who should not be teaching. I believe that disciplinary expertise is important. I have a Japanese literature and Chinese philosophy doctorate, but that has never It has only helped me understand the workforce issues and the issues of human potential. We don't want to attenuate what is really good in our academy, but we must understand that because of democratization of education, you're not teaching the second sons who are going to be, working in a church because his brother is going to have an entail of some manor house, so the brother doesn't have to work. That's the reasons why four-year institutions were created. So I think our institutions have been creating over time to react to who needs education. So in this generation, I believe we need scholars who understands research and long-term implications, and that's talked about in this institute, that they need to understand what it means to work with a diverse population, that ESL is a promise and not a deficit. We're going to have multilingual students. So I think those kinds of changing of minds have happened over time. You can't do it tomorrow, but then you know what? You can't stand still either. Sometimes it's calling a chicken what it is. It's a chicken. You need to change. And we've had those really heated conversations, but without it, you don't move the academy. But it's not a different academy. It's still the same academy. So,
when we have this conversation, and I mentioned when I started the workshops that we put in place, these last about 3 days, and they last for 3 days for a reason. It takes about a day for people to come off their corner and relax and say, what are you really trying to accomplish here? Are you trying to put me out of a job? Are you trying to, all the types of things that go along with this. But the piece that comes to mind, and I'm going to invoke Clayton Christensen here because he's played such a big role for us, and of course we're all a little sad about his passing right now, but it's the jobs to be done is the conversation we try to have with our teachers. When we put you in this room, it is, what are the jobs, going back to what Pam was just saying, for the students who are coming to us, what are we expecting them to do with the learning that they're getting from us? Because it's not necessarily, these aren't necessarily the students who are going to go on and be researchers at institutions. Also, it's just a job that also still is very valuable and needs to be done, but these aren't those students. For these students, what are the skill sets that they are coming to us for? How do we take that and link it to the work that you are trying to do as a critical part of the conversation that we're trying to have with them? And they, over time, began to get that. It is a journey, not an epiphany for many of them. But over time, they began to appreciate that. I think the other piece to that that's really important is in that future of work model, many of the jobs that we're talking about aren't going to be the same in 5 years. And that will continue to only accelerate over time. And in a model where it takes you, we're talking about this particularly in our STEM areas right now, if it takes us 2.5 years to get a curriculum through and jobs are going to change every 5, we're obsolete before the program gets out the door. So how do you begin to think about rethinking how you build those models in a way that's adaptable and it will work with that evolution over time is also part of that conversation that we're having with them. And they begin to appreciate, but again, journey, not epiphany is what we see.
Garrett, do you have anything to add?
A quick comment on the journey. So our former chancellor used to like to say, we're a research university with a teaching soul. So the faculty that we have are invested in their research and their scholarship, but they are really invested in our students. And so they're willing participants in the journey. And I don't have any concern that we will unanchor ourselves from traditional scholarship. But I believe that we have to go in that direction. Our faculty believe we have to continue to think about student success, and that includes job skills and workforce development. So.
And you have a new program. Is it the PACE program, with the apprenticeship program that you're trying to?
Yeah. So one of the things we've been doing is trying to, because not only do our students not have connections necessarily to the employers in town, but they don't necessarily have the work experience on their resume to get the internships or get the full-time job. And so we're trying to stand up more structured apprenticeships on campus that our faculty, our administrators can work with students and help them build some of these skills and on a progression so that they can start with simple things and then work their way up and build the resume.
So our faculty that's new curriculum.
Our faculty have been super excited about that, and it would be four credit apprenticeship, so it's really integrating workforce with our faculty.
Great, thank you. Question over here. Microphone is coming. 1 second. Okay.
So first of all, Greg, this isn't for you. So
Yay.
I still have a job on Monday.
You must be part of your staff.
I want to direct this towards Pam, and please correct me if I'm mistaken.
I work for him too. You know?
Yeah. Don't we all? So Pam, I want to direct this to you, talking about meeting students where they are.
Yes.
And I may be mistaken. I thought it was your institution, but a few years ago, I experimented with I'll call it a third shift of education.
Yeah, the midnight classes on the train, we're
Yeah.
on the orange line.
Yeah, so could you tell a little bit more about that, and is it still going on, and what was it successful? What's the data say?
So we've been, the whole idea for that was about 10 years ago. My predecessor, wonderful Dr. Mary Fifield, decided that those folks who are working day shifts can't get to college, right? And at that point, online education is not what it is. So she would teach 4 or 5 or 6 classes at midnight, so the students can actually get their education done. This is a really good example of what technology can do to restore equity of opportunity. Those classes have become online. We don't run that program anymore because you can do it in bunny slippers at your house now, right? So one of the things that I say about technology, particularly in these venues, is technology is right for me if it is a tool that can allow, let's say, a single mother of 2 to never come on campus, yet experience all of the different things that we talked about economically, academically, and in terms of work. It is, so yes, that is the beginning of our thinking about how to meet the students where they are.
Great. Any other questions?
I had a question, actually. I was wondering, and it was Pam that mentioned it, but anyone that wants to address it may. I was wondering if you could talk to what you feel the role of the university is in changing some of those federal definitions that are geared toward more traditional students. How do you kind of bridge that gap between, the FERPA and all of that, or I'm sorry, FAFSA, like those sorts of that discontinuity?
So I think a part of it is that there is actually a very cohesive national advocacy network that most of us belong to, whether they're at the 4-year level or the 2-year level, where everybody's at one DuPont circle in DC, and that's where a lot of the policy changes are crafted. We go at our lawmakers at the federal level. I'll give you an example. About 6 or 7 years ago, the Pell Grant was eliminated for the summer. Right, so you can imagine all the nursing students not having Pell Grants in the summer, all of the folks who are with short-term training not having that in the summer. They took it away because it was a surplus and it didn't feel like we needed it. So it took 2 years, but we actually was able to, through those coalitions and individual action, get Congress to change their mind. The reauthorization of the Higher Education Act is in place, and a lot of the policies that you're talking about is going to be embedded. The last time it was reauthorized was, 2008? So our student population has changed a great deal. A lot of times we say, our presidents are external presidents. What are you doing out there on the street? That's the kind of work that we do, right? To make sure that we move the federal level of policy work so that when it comes down to the campuses, it transforms the campus. Congress doesn't really know that we have a hunger issue on our campus. When we did that congressional briefing, folks with their jaws on the floor, they don't know unless we tell them. And I think that's part of, the responsibility of upper level administration, not just to look at budgets, but to look at workforce trends, policy trends that keeps us from doing this workforce work. But yeah, we're out there. We're kind of invisible, but we're doing the push.
Or visible in certain places, but not everywhere.
Those congressional briefings take forever, but they really do work.
Hard for me to imagine this panel being invisible in anything. But
I try.
But I think that as well, you see a lot of places where schools are having that impact. The job I had before I came to SNHU was at Western Governors University, and I think Scott was here yesterday talking a lot about the work there. A university that was founded by governors and has risen the conversation around things like competency-based education, which is also tied very much to credit hour conversations, also tied very much to some of the policies and practices that you see happening about work and academics around the country. Right now, of course, we are about to embark. I live in New Hampshire, and of course, this time of year it's impossible to get into New Hampshire without stepping on a politician. somewhere trying to talk about things. And they are very welcome to come talk to us about what are the various ways that we should be thinking about education. So I think you see a lot of that. Barbara Brittingham, Pam and I are both on the New England Commission for Higher Education, spends a huge amount of time in Washington talking to them, but they also spend a lot of time talking at the state level and other places about how does this need to change? How do the practices need to be supported in different ways to make sure that that is happening? So the conversation is happening. Part of the challenge is we're talking about non-traditional students here. And the bottom line is that given the numbers, non-traditional students almost number as much as, in some cases, number more than traditional students. And as colleges are thinking about how to deal with them, how do you get the government to stop thinking about first-time in college students as the only metric by which we should be dealing with these types of things? So these are the conversations that are being had. They just aren't always being had as openly in broad panels as you would think they should be.
So, but there's also, I know that we always turn outward, but you also have to look inward at your own institution and their policies. So if you have a wonderful internship program, right, is there a credit requirement? Do they have to be full-time or at least 9 credits in order to participate in an internship? And how do you do that when you're a part-time student and a mother of 2? So a lot of the policies is structural. Those inequities are structural and internal. So before we go and yell at Congress, we really need to do reviews of what we're doing on campus.
It's true on the metrics we use also.
Yeah, absolutely.
When I arrived on campus 3 years ago, I was shocked to realize that the federal metrics are the ones that everyone on campus uses to measure our success, right? If
You
we're
have
only
2
looking
people
at
graduating, right?
first-time,
At one
full-time
time.
freshmen, well, if we have thousands of transfer students and thousands of them are coming in and not really being measured or talked about, that's a problem. So we need to disaggregate, and we need to look at understanding the success of all our students and not be defined by those metrics, even if the policy doesn't change.
Right. Agreed.
And we see that in so many different places, right? We're defining ourselves by the definition of others, and we're really not looking to see if those really are the success metrics for our organizations. And we sometimes do some harm. Unconsciously, we do some harm by doing that. And I think language is really important because if we are being measured by statistics that don't make any sense, really, and don't fit the population that you're catering to, then the language out there starts looking like you're not being as successful as you should be, and then you get all different kinds of pressure. Maybe enrollments are affected by that. So language is so important, and how we, so I think that outward push to make sure that, and that's hard. That's a hard ball to carry, right? To change federal metrics. But I think it's really important to balance that and celebrate the successes that you already have, and we see them. I work with all of you, and I see what's coming out of your institutions, and I see the success that we have in the workforce with folks that are graduating from your institutions. And those are the things that we really need to really lift up when we're having these conversations. We're very fortunate to have had the 3 of you here today. I'm really thrilled that we were able to have this panel. Unfortunately, we are out of time. I think we could probably be here another hour. But I want to give our panelists another round of success, and thank you all for coming.
Thank you.